There we go. Technical difficulties, folks. Good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I am your host, Tiffany Daniels. And yes, as usual on Sunday, we are going over our second Medicaid video for the week. In particular, this has to do with Medicaid funding allocated for things such as supported employment. This is in regards to a survey, or as they have it up here, an issued brief that was done around circa 2019. We're going into it because I want you guys to get kind of an idea in regards to numbers of those of us who utilize services that depend on Medicaid funding that you won't necessarily hear about in mainstream media. A good majority of folks, including those who actually have authority in regards to Medicaid funding, such as those in the House and in the Senate, don't realize that Medicaid in particular is a lot more than just medical care or mental health care. That funding gets used in a lot of different programs, hence why we're doing these series, so that hopefully, and let's face it, it's a small channel and it's amateur hour over here, at least by word of mouth, some individuals can begin to learn and understand these programs so they're not cutting everything off at the knees. You can't just hack into funding like this, like you're hacking down what remains of a tree stump. You are going to destroy a lot of the very programs that are there to help provide the type of results, such as community-based employment, that they're constantly complaining about, and ironically enough, making a mandate in order to still qualify for Medicaid. So we're going to be going to continue to go over that. We'll continue to focus on this for now. We are going to be getting into more in regards to things such as assisted living apartments, group homes, things of that nature as we continue to go through the series, because it becomes more apparent by the day to me that, yeah, they really don't know what they're doing or exactly what they're cutting. Alright, now we're going to get to the trigger warnings and then go back to where we left off yesterday. But before we do, just a brief little brag. Now, all of us know how essentially myself and a lot of us older folks that have been in disability rights movements for years, the younger advocates that have come in since, all of us have been running around like chickens with our heads cut off to reach out to even some of our worst enemies, even being willing to reach out to places like Autism Speaks, as well as ARC, the Autism Self-Advocacy Network, Neuroplastic, ARC of the United States, let me just put the full name in there. DCO, Developmental Center of the Ozarks, was also pitching in stateside from over here, as did Nova and Burrell, and of course, as always, Judifine always have their finger on the pulse of anything that could be potentially threatening to any of us. And that's because Becky Blackwell is a girl boss. If you want me to describe to you what I think a real girl boss looks like, it's not what you're going to see on social media. It's going to be Becky and Lois Blackwell, the women who founded Judifine Centers for Autism out of St. Louis. I've known both of them for years. You want to know what girl bosses look like? Go onto their website sometime. They are pretty awesome individuals. So, all these groups, Autism Speaks, ARC, People First, Nova, ASAM, Neuroclastic, all of us In particular, a good majority of those groups I named are usually at the throat of places like Autism Speaks. But this was a situation where we had to throw aside our quarrels with one another because something far larger was at stake with them pushing that autism registry. I do want to mention why we were freaking out. Because it was told to me, but Kennedy is a moron, yes, but he's Catholic. He's not going to use that for eugenics. But there's the rub. Who's going to be coming in after them? And are they going to be as afraid of eugenics and talks of selective boarding people like us as a means of eradication? Are they going to be more friendly to that idea than he is? You got to be a lot more far-sighted when we talk about these things and have these types of discussions. Because the fact of the matter is, regardless of his own personal beliefs and his code, it sets a precedent. It puts all of that information into somebody else's hands whose motives we don't know, nor, if we look at history, can we ever trust. Okay? Another reason why we were freaking out, regardless of whether he's pro-life or not, he's already been discussing putting people like me with anti-anxiety medication we have to take to help keep ourselves sane in a world that is not built for us, onto organic wellness farms to work with no medication for 2 years. If you really think that that's going to continue to just stick with those who take those kind of medications, then I'm going to have to tell you to put the crack pipe down. We are a paranoid bunch for a reason. Okay? Hence why I don't like politicians from either side. You get into this type of work, you get a rude awakening. Let's just put it that way. What I want to brag about is because all those groups came together, because the backlash was not just us advocates, it was our families, it was our parents, it's places that were usually at each other's throats extremely viscerally, like Autism Speaks in particular, were able to put all that aside. And because of that backlash, in spite of the NIH director saying that they're going to do a registry, they are now walking that back, saying no, and that's not what we meant. Now, if you're not familiar with political doublespeak in particular in dealing with disability rights, let me tell you what that actually is. That is someone trying to obscure and at least paint in a better light what was actually said in the first place that caused the backlash. Right? Usually when that doesn't work, there's a scapegoat. And it never works out well for said scapegoat. Thing is, yes, an autism registry was specifically mentioned. Yes, in the announcement of that autism registry, it was talked about with people without our permission and consent getting access to our very private, vulnerable medical information. We're talking prescriptions, diagnostic papers, we're talking mental health information, things that I would not be comfortable with anyone looking at without my express consent. Because usually there's only 2 people on earth I allow to have access to that information other than my doctor. That would be me and my mom. That's it. Right? But yeah, they're walking it back now because the backlash was huge. This is what we can do when we work together, folks. This is what we can do, not just working together, but when we can actually get ourselves properly organized. That is key. Sporadic protests are great, but coordinated efforts have always been far more likely to move mountains politically than anything else, other than backroom deals. I've done both. I'm not proud of having engaged in backroom deals previously when I was working for the state, but if it helped my folks to say, do this, or people are going to hear about it from me that you wouldn't when you could have helped us, I'm not sorry that I did it, but still icky. It makes me feel icky. Anyways, as of right now, there will be no autism registry. And they are walking it back so fast. I don't think they really understood the massive amount of backlash that was actually going to cause. So, let us not lose that energy, because, folks, the threat is far from over. We got to walk back one thing. In regards to Medicaid, this is vital, okay? This is, lives depend on this funding in more ways than one. So now we need to coordinate those efforts, and we gotta go in the same way we did with the autism registry. We gotta not be afraid. We gotta pass off threats like it's nothing more than an annoying mosquito. Okay? Keep up the energy. Medicaid's gonna be the biggest fight a majority of us have seen in over a decade. Alright? You know the saying, in for a penny, in for a pound? Keep that energy. Do not disperse. Do not let everybody go their separate ways. Medicaid is the big one. Alright? Okay, so, folks, the single trigger warning. We do have this channel marked not for kids for a reason. We do use profanity and speak on dark subjects. So if your child is 16 and younger and they are watching this, parental supervision is advised. I also want to say, because this is my old shirt from a previous employer, Wayfair is not endorsing any of this. It's just an old t-shirt that I think looks nice on me, alright? Just wanted to say that so I don't get anybody in trouble. Specifically me. I'm dealing with enough. Alright. Identification strategy for beneficiaries with a disability. Because supported employment has been proven to help people with disabilities obtain employment, we used a task to identify subpopulation of beneficiaries with a disability. Typically, a person with a disability is defined as someone who has a physical, intellectual, or mental impairment that limits his or her ability to perform major life activities, such as caring for oneself, walking, or seeing. Now, it used to be it had to be 2 major life activities. Since the cuts that took place about around 2010, that was increased to 3, at least out here in Missouri. That's what I meant when I tell you every time there is a cut, they have to go back and then tighten even more the eligibility criteria because there just isn't enough funding to cover everyone. Yeah, that's why I keep bringing that up. 1 second here. People with disabilities might be eligible for Medicaid through multiple pathways, including through receipt of supplemental security income. Remember, that's its own topic. Yes, we are going to be doing a series about that later on, because that's going to be the next big fight. But yeah, only so much time in a day, folks, and I'm already going crazy juggling multiple series at once while trying to keep in touch with everybody and keeping an eye on if our state GOP out here in Missouri decides to go psycho, which, considering it's an every other year sort of thing, yeah, you got to keep your eyes on them. Just saying. Alright, we used enrollment records in DE file and claims files to identify people with disabilities. In the TAF-RIF DE file, states place beneficiaries into different eligibility groups based on the state's eligibility determination process. Some of these groups are associated with people with disabilities, and we used them for this analysis. So places like ARC, for example. Vocational rehabilitation literally has an office that is specifically helping folks like me with developmental disabilities get into community-based employment. In particular, out here, I know, because I was one of the major consultants when we were forming the pilot project to see if it was something that was viable. We have one that we specifically created for neurodivergence. The pilot project went phenomenally well, so that is now its own separate subset with folks that are more experienced in working with neurodivergent folks to be the types of job coaches, getting us to the right providers to be of best assistance in getting people like us community-based employment. Alright, states can also indicate if a beneficiary is enrolled in a program for people with disabilities, such as enrollment in a 1915 waiver, state plan options, PACE, or MFP demonstration. We use the indicators from the DE file to identify beneficiaries with a disability. Besides enrollment records, we identified claims in the IP, LT, and OT files that had 1915 C, I, or J services, which we presume to be services for beneficiaries with a disability. We also searched for claims associated with a state and an intermediate care facility for people with intellectual disability, which we also presume to be a claim for a beneficiary with a disability. So there we're talking about things such as group homes, like I've mentioned before, residential school programs, such as Rivendell we have out here in town. Enrollment records and claims might not reveal all people with disabilities. We can find beneficiaries with a disability using the determination of their eligibility for Medicaid enrollment, such as their Medicaid eligibility determined by enrollment in supplemental security income. You see, that's what happened with me. I had to wait a minute to get approved for everything. And the way it works out here is Medicaid and SSI work in tangent with each other. So, it took me far longer to get approved for SSI. Obviously, I'm no longer on it, and I confused everyone when I kept saying, but the whole goal was for me to get off SSI and get off of Medicaid. I wanted full-time work with insurance that didn't suck. I've been the same annoying person I am today. Just saying. How they put up with me, I don't even know. anyways, if you get approved for Medicaid, you usually end up with SSI. If you get SSI, you usually get approved for Medicaid. However, with the acts that's standing over current Medicaid funding and SSI, it's not looking good, folks. Not looking good. However, beneficiaries might meet multiple eligibility criteria, which may or may not indicate that they have a disability. Using claims might identify more people with a disability, but not all people with a disability receive types of services that would indicate their disability status. So let me put it out this way. In regards to Medicaid, it's more than just us folks with developmental disabilities, whether we're neurodivergent or whatever the disability might be, that use Medicaid services. Very young mothers use Medicaid. Folks who have mental health issues use Medicaid. A lot of dual diagnosers like myself were on Medicaid for, I was on there till about 2008, which is why my teeth suck, because the entirety of time I was on Medicaid, there was not a single dentist anywhere that actually would accept it and would work on my teeth. So now I have to suffer the repercussions for that. That's neither here nor there, but still salty about it. Still salty about it. But yeah, because people get access to Medicaid that are not necessarily folks with developmental disabilities, that's what they're talking about there. You got young mothers, folks who are lower income, things of that nature. That doesn't necessarily necessitate that that person has a disability. Therefore, they may not need access to something like supported employment and that specific earmarked Medicaid funding for those programs for people like myself. When using service claims to identify beneficiaries with a disability, we use a 2-year look-back period. That is, the beneficiary must have had a qualifying claim in 2018 or 2019 to be identified as a beneficiary with a disability in 2019. It is possible that a beneficiary did not meet any of the 4 criteria but still had a disability. Wow, they increased it even since I was there. Like, when I was there, they increased it to 3. Wow, 4. I would have never got any kind of help. I am sometimes very glad that I am bullheaded and stubborn as a mule. Just saying. Alright, so that gives us a pretty good view of what we're taking a look at here and why there's kind of a bunch of different discrepancies that make gathering this data a little bit difficult. But it's still, in my opinion, going to give us a good idea in regards to numbers for those folks who use that funding for things like supported employment. So we're going to go ahead and close out for this one. We don't get very many views on this channel, and the few we do tend to get removed from time to time. So folks, if you could, please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, please don't forget to hit the comments. I absolutely do appreciate your time, and as always folks, we here at Spilling Tea hope you have a good one. I will see you all tomorrow with my preloaded JRC videos. Bye-bye everyone.